Hey, I'm Peggy Barksdale. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana originally, but I'm here in Arizona in the Sedona area, in Cottonwood. I want to talk about the importance of mentorship, where a seasoned RN can tuck a newbie under her wings, and an experienced nurse can share wisdom with the novice. That's how it was played into my career fulfillment. Now remember, a new male or a female that has gone to nursing school, got into nursing school, graduated, passed their boards, and got a license to practice, this is one smart individual. And what is needed is to have this profession know to mold the compassion and the empathy and also the finesse of critical skills. We are not to eat our own, as the old saying goes. I was fortunate to have fellow nurses put me under their wing and show me how to become a leader. My first floor was orthopedics, even though I told HR any floor but orthopedics, but it turned out to be my stepping stone. And I had the best manager and a well-oiled staff for this first timer. In 1977, I was green. That's what my manager said. And so I was paired with a 2-year RN, and she was brilliant. And I also learned teamwork from her. I was told that the nurse is not above the aides, the orderlies, or even housekeeping, for everyone works as a team and has importance on the floor. For example, as a housekeeper is calling me into a room with a distraught patient, or an orderly stopping me and saying 464 does not look good, and finding out the SOB, the shortness of breath, is respiratory distress. Now, I've discovered that what I knew in a textbook, that book knowledge, is totally different from real life. And one of them was when I had my first bladder prolapse. I thought my little patient who had 11 babies, that she had dropped her uterus as well as her other innards. I called out to my head nurse, "Help!" And calmly the nurse looked at me and even the patient and said, "Oh, just gently push it back in." Yeah, I'm from that generation of white dresses, pantyhose, wearing clinic shoes, donning a nurse's cap and a school pin. Yeah, I'm kind of glad that past fashion has led the way to wearing pants, scrub tops, and comfy shoes. Still proudly wearing my stethoscope as a standard and a hallmark of nursing. See? Back to learning examples. When serious complexities was early in a shift when a patient came from the emergency room with a long-legged cast on. I had just medicated that patient not even an hour ago with Demerol, meperidine, 100 milligrams, and Phenergan, and still he's complaining of severe pain. Now, I need to look at this extremity. I just know it's crooked or it's cattywampus. Lo and behold, edema, severe edema, and also the skin color is gray. I could not locate the dorsal pedal pulse, and I called my mentor staff. Bingo, we had the rarity, compartment syndrome. There's no meter like we use today to measure the pressure in the tissues. We called the surgeon, and we began to use the cast saw to take off the plaster. And she guided me up and down, up and down. I never used one of those tools. Then you see, as soon as the plaster opens, my extremity pinked up, I found my pulse, and the pain was eased. As said, a rare complication, but most life-threatening. This is where even the book from school, and you know when you read those chapters, Here's the point. Point one, point two. This is what you're supposed to do. Yeah. Example, hands-on experience. It burns into your memory cells how to proceed. And with that, you remember such another occasion may come. I have had encouragement from many mentors to obtain orthopedic certification and returned to graduate school for my master's as a clinical nurse specialist, where I developed a program for the network called the Centers for Joint Health. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Donna Chalmers. I grew up in Benson, Minnesota, a town of 4,000 friendly people. And I graduated from St. Barnabas Hospital in 1961 in Minneapolis. Then in 1962, I got a phone call from Washington. And they said, we have your application for the Peace Corps. And would you be interested in going to Tanganyika? Well, I said, where is Tanganyika? I didn't have any idea. And he said, it's in East Africa, and we have 26 nurses going. So I said, yeah, okay. And so it ended up to be the best 2 years of my life, actually. And there were 16 of us that were situated in Dar es Salaam, and that was at the time the capital city. And it was about 100,000 people, but just one traffic light. And now there's over 3 million, so it's really grown. But the hospital was called Princess Margaret Hospital because they were still under the British rule. And we were there to see the independence and the first African president, Julius Nyerere, and the hospital became Muhimbili Hospital. And when I was there, it was, I was just 22, and just being thrown into this other culture was both frustrating at times. I can remember we had Deki Day, and Deki Day meant go with your flip-flops on because they're going to flood the whole ward with garden hose of water. All the patients had to be moved out unless they were unconscious, and they could stay in. And then they would take a broom and sweep this water around like this was the most important thing. And I said, the medicine and the treatments have to go on, and nobody agreed with me, but they didn't stop me. So I did continue doing that. But it was good, but I felt like we weren't Peace Corps enough. I wanted to go in the bush. And I know on our days off, I'll back up and say on our days off in Dar es Salaam, my roommate, Carol Siriani, who was a little Italian gal from the Bronx in New York, we stayed roommates throughout the 2 years. And we would go to the orphanage and take kids out. I mean, they didn't question us. We'd just say, well, how many kids do you want to send with us to the beach today? And off we would go. Didn't sign anybody out. Actually, one of our nurses fell in love with one of the little girls, and she adopted her. And then she had to go home early because they wouldn't let her stay then. But we did that, and we also went to one of the schools and played with the older kids. So we were kind of in demand when they saw our bicycle that was for 2 people. And everybody wanted to ride that, So we never had a car, of course, we always had bikes. But then we went on vacation, Carol and I, and when we came back, they said, we've got good news, you can go in the bush. So they sent Carol and another gal, Jean, and myself to 550 miles inland, and it took us 2.5 days on a train to get there. And that was really my favorite part of the Peace Corps, because it wasn't a hospital, it was like separate shacks, huts maybe, kind of sort of thing. I mean, the windows didn't close or anything. And I went to pediatrics because that's always been my first love. And we had probably only beds for maybe about 8 kids, and the rest had to be on the floor. The mothers could not stay with them unless they were under 2 years old and nursing. So, I do have to back up. My first day at Dar es Salaam, in the afternoon, they made me head nurse. I was there for training in the morning. In the afternoon, I was head nurse. Lo and behold, 50 people come from a tribe, and they're coming to take one of our sickest women out. She had tetanus, so she was seizuring. She had hepatitis, and I was just appalled, you know, and so I'm calling, trying to get the doctor to come over and trying to get supervisors. And I learned a saying in Swahili. It's Shauri ya Mungu. It's the will of God. Just let it go. Let him go. Let her go. So they took her, and I understand it was about a 3.5-day trip to get her back to her village, which I don't know, you know, with tetanus and how many people did she infect with the hepatitis. It was, so, I mean, I would go home crying sometimes with situations like that. But anyway, now I'm in Tabora, out in the bush, kind of. And it seemed like the staff was more congenial, should I say, to us. And I can remember one day in November 1963, one of the orderlies came running up and said, "Your father's been killed, your father's been killed." And actually my father had died while I was home on 2 weeks to pack our bags to go over to Tanganyika. And so I knew it wasn't my father, it was President Kennedy. And they let us go home, they gave us a day off, and we had people coming from South Africa, from British people. I mean, I was amazed way back inland how they knew President Kennedy. So that was very meaningful. In January of '64, there was an army rebellion in the town, the village where we were at. There was a army rifle branch, and they were rebelling against the British white people being there. And then it kind of went from the British officers to, if you're white, just your skin. So I experienced prejudice, and it was not good. So they came and they were shooting up at the hospital, and I thought it was firecrackers at first. And we hid in a closet until the commissioner, who was from India, came with his little Volkswagen and got us out of there. And they were still shooting at the car. And we hid for 2 days with the commissioner. And then the guy that we knew from Tabora, he was Tanganyikan, he squelched the rebellion, which had also spread to Dar es Salaam, and then things settled down. But unfortunately, my family got no word, so they didn't know. And they had articles in our little Benson paper, "No word yet from Donna Abner." A picture of me, you know. So it was the beginning of the Peace Corps. You know, it started in '61 and we went in '62. So there were a lot of rules that they had to learn later. And the other thing was that when we got there, we were called Tanganyika 2. Tanganyika 1 was 30 guys, engineers and surveyors. And they were actually the first Peace Corps people in the Peace Corps. Jake has number 1 on his card. So we still keep in touch, and we have reunions about every 2 years. I went to Lake Tahoe 2 years ago and Santa Fe this last year. So there's always that bond. We'll never lose that bond with us. So I'm gonna just, can I have a drink of water? I'm going to fast forward to 2006, and I retired in 2001. And I'd always wanted to go back to Tanganyika, but you know, you get married, you have kids, and you have a job, and just never worked out. So we were going to church at Scottsdale Bible Church here in Arizona. And in the bulletin, they were asking for volunteers for a medical team to go to Tanzania. So of course, I volunteered and went, and we went to a remote village with the Maasai tribe. And there were doctors, dentists, nurses, about 22 of us. And I thought that would be my story. And it was a very good experience and loved it. But we were staying at Ilboro Safari Lodge, and the electricity would go out and the water would stop, and in the kind of the place where I was staying. And so I went up to the lobby, and this woman came over to me and she said, "Can your team go and see these children in the school nearby?" She said, "Some don't have their right minds, some can't hear, some can't talk." She said, "I've been giving them a cup of tea for 2 years." So I said, "Yeah, I'll ask." And so I asked, and they said, "No. Our goal is to go to this remote village and take care of the Maasai. We just don't have time." So I felt bad. So I said, I have an hour and a half to pack my bags to go back to America. I'll come then. So I went. This gets to be so hard for me. But this was 18 years ago, and I still break down. They were asking for a piece of bread. So I said, "Piece of bread, inside of it, just about dying." They said, "Yeah, if we have a loaf of bread like this size, just cut it down the middle and cut it that way. That could be 4 kids." So I'm going, how many loaves and how much? So it was about $110 a month to feed these 35 kids. It was just one classroom. What divided the deaf children from the children that had special needs cognitively was just a blackboard, that you could move. And so anyway, I got on the plane, I had no idea. I thought, I don't think I can even give them that much every month. Had no idea. So I'm in the post office telling somebody about my trip, and later on that evening I get a call saying, "Would you be the speaker for our Women's Advent luncheon?" So I did, and that was the first $1,600 that went to Ilboro School for Special Needs. And I don't know, it's been a miracle, but we got some money, and I was talking at different churches and different organizations. And I said, "Well, what do you need next, Loy?" And he said, "Water." He said, "We have to stop teaching, have to go up to the Lutheran church on the hill, get a 5-gallon pail of water, come down and make chai." And so we drew, what do you call it? we got the water in the well, and I brought some pictures. I'll show you how excited the kids were and everybody. And then over the generator, or I guess it was a generator or an engine of some kind, because there's still crime over there. They were afraid that somebody was going to steal that, so they built this big cement thing around it, and on it says, "Dedicated to Julu Matili," who's the woman that owned the lodge and brought me down, and Peace Corps, Tanganyika 1, Tanganyika 2, from Minnesota. They were all from Minnesota. Gosh. And it still says that. I was back in 2011, saw it again. So, so that's a miracle. They got new classrooms, 4 new classrooms, girls' dorm, boys' dormitory, solar on one of the buildings. And it wasn't all because of me. We joined with Operation Bootstrap Africa from Minneapolis. They build classrooms in Africa. Abercrombie is a big company and another travel agency. So it goes on. But about 10 days ago, my daughter Sarah, who's a hospice nurse in Phoenix, called and said, "Mom, we want to go to Africa." She said, "Jennifer and I want to go to Africa and see where you were and see the school and the kids and everything." So we're going in August. So when I had a normal life, my other life, I was in the OB/GYN clinic, school nurse, child and adult psych. I taught in a technical college. I was a Pillsbury Company nurse. I dealt with chronically mentally ill adults. I went back to college in 84 to 86 and got my bachelor's degree. And I became a public health nurse for the last 16 years before I retired in 2001. I came out of retirement to be a hospice nurse and worked at Rainbow Acres here in Arizona, Verde Valley Caregivers. I did assessments with Dr. Linda Romer in assisted living places, and I quit when I was 80 years old. I'm 84 now, because of COVID. I would encourage all students, or all students thinking of nursing, that there are such a variety of things that you can do, and you will pick a passion. And I never regretted being a nurse. So I hope that we can encourage others to come into the nursing. Thank you. Oh, you want to see Tanzania? Oh, yeah. This is when they drilled the well. And you can kind of see where it is over there, and the water's shooting out of the hose. And there's the dedication to Jula Matili, Peace Corps T1 and T2, and all from Minnesota. And these are the kids. We did, like I said, we built new classrooms, and then, of course, they didn't have any desks, so we had to buy desks and chairs, too. But this Loy Yamat, who's the head teacher, started out in a closet. The government gave him a closet to start with 4 children. So that's me, and that's Jula Matili that brought me down. That's Loy Yamat, the head teacher, and another teacher, Rose. And they had, when I went there the first time, they had a teacher on right over here who was an albino. And that's Jula Matili again, and Loy. And we now have, I think, 4 students who have a condition of albinoism, because there it's like witchcraft. They want to cut off their fingers, or they cut off different parts, and it's not safe for an albino child to be there. I brought a toothbrush and toothpaste for him. This little guy started brushing his teeth right in the classroom. And then he was kind of choking and everything, so he left. I thought, I wonder how long it'll take them to miss this little guy. And they didn't. He finally came back in again. But he was so cute. He didn't really know how to brush his teeth. Thank you.
Well done.
Hi, I'm Janelle Davis. I originally was from Pennsylvania, moved to Nebraska where my grandparents lived, so I could go away from home to go to nursing. I had been a candy striper at the University of Pittsburgh the entire time I was in high school, so that's what led me to nursing. I ended up going to the University of Nebraska School of Nursing at that time, you spent a year in college, and then you went to the School of Nursing. And that was 3 years of no pay because you worked various shifts. Much to my disgust, I guess you could say, that was canceled after I started in Omaha, which was where the school was, and they changed it to the College of Nursing, and we had to pay regular tuition all 3 years that I was there. In the meantime, I met my husband, who was a dentist. I put him through school in Lincoln for 2 years of dental school. Worked at the student health, which was really good. We had one car, so we could work between us of when he was in dental school, and I worked permanent 3 to 11s, so we always had a car available. And then he graduated, went to the University of Nebraska. It was the surgery department, but he did oral surgery, which was a little different. And he ended up with a double degree, so he did dentistry and medicine. And the entire time I worked putting him through, so I got my MRS, Mrs., for putting my husband through school. And I quit then to have our children and did not go back to nursing, did other volunteer work. And then when my kids first one went to college, I went back to nursing and worked at an assisted living facility as director of nursing. So when you haven't worked for all those years and all of a sudden you're assessing people, you have to learn pretty darn quick because we had license levels. And if they were beyond our license level, we had to politely ask the family to move them. When I worked in the hospital, when my husband was going to school, I worked in the OR. And there again, because the director of that department would put me on call on the nights when my husband wasn't on call, so we could use our one and only car. We had one car for 10 years, of which he was in school all of the time. He finally got a job, and that was one of the reasons I quit, so I could be home with the kids, and I did not work. And I guess my suggestion and advice for new nurses is help each other. When we had our very first reunion of those of us in our college, and there were only 35 of us, so it was we were very competitive. There was 15 points between the lowest score and the highest score, so we were all very competitive. When we got out for our first reunion, someone said, "Boy, I was really scared. I had to give that shot, or I had to put the catheter in." And we never helped each other. We didn't support each other. We didn't know the other person was frightened. We just thought, I'm the only one that was scared about doing all of these things that we read about and were watched with the instructor. But we didn't help each other. And we have done this. I graduated in '65, and we've had yearly reunions almost the entire time. We Zoom every month. And so my advice is, remember that all of you are in the same boat. Help each other. Explain to each other how you feel so that you can continue on and thrive in your profession. That's it. Short and sweet, thank you.
My name is Meg Watts, and I've been a nurse for, I can't remember how long it's been. It's been so long. Anyway, I had always wanted to be a nurse. I come from a long line of nurses. It took me 10 years to get a 2-year degree, so all of you out there who are having a difficult time getting an education, if you really care about your profession, persevere. You'll get there. When I did become a nurse, I had to thank my experience as a nurse's aide during those 10 years for teaching me and giving me the experience of what nursing really meant. By the time I graduated from nurses training. I had experienced all the different departments at a hospital, including a TB sanitarium, a psychiatric ward. There's not much I didn't experience. So I was really comfortable. And I had a lot of compassion for my classmates who had a little problem adjusting. So I was really grateful that everything was familiar to me. So be kind to yourself as you're matriculating through. And if I had not had that experience as being a nurse's aide, I would have missed a lot. Bedside nursing is essential to be able to supervise other nurses, nurses' aides, and it just gives you a level of compassion and knowledge that you won't get anyplace else. Even if you don't go into bedside nursing, it'll give you an experience that's invaluable. I guess for me, I was a pediatric nurse for a long time, an oncology pediatric nurse, and I also one of my best experiences, an unforgettable experience for me, it was in education. I never thought of myself as a nurse who would educate, but I worked at a teaching hospital in San Francisco, California Pacific Medical Center, and when we moved into that hospital, I became the team leader of the ENT floor. I knew nothing about ophthalmology. It had been my last interest in nurses training, and so this was a big ophthalmology unit center, ENT center. We served a lot of disorders, eye diseases, low vision facility, and I was in charge of knowing how to run this. And how could you be supportive and teach anybody if you don't know what you're doing? So I worked with a fabulous group of interns, residents, and I put together a program. If the occasion warrants it, use your creativity, your ingenuity, and do what you have to do. I put together a program for nurses and allied health professionals that went nationwide with the help of the residents and the doctors in their specialty fields. And it was a fabulous program. I learned a lot. Social work, low vision, but I still felt like I didn't know enough. And so I contacted different hospitals around the country to see if I could get some extra training. And there wasn't any place that really was suitable for what I needed. So I wrote Moorfields Eye Hospital in London, England, and they invited me over as a visiting nurse to matriculate through their hospital. Moorfields Eye Hospital is an 8-story hospital that serves all of England, London, and they also serve tropical diseases. So I had a month there rotating through this hospital. I had a wonderful experience in what I call international nursing. I got to see how a different culture nurses, what they do, how it differs from ours, and it was an invaluable experience that I'll never forget. And when I returned, things had changed at my hospital, and I decided to go back and get my degree in nursing, which I did. But halfway through, I decided I'm not too sure I want to do this anymore, so I got a degree in psychology, and I went into integrative health nursing, and I love it. And I have a private practice doing jiu-jitsu. And why am I telling you this? Because there's nowhere that nursing won't take you if you are open to travel, if you are open to different specialties, if you are open to exploration. So persevere. And last but not least, what I would like to say is be kind to one another, support one another, help one another. Nurses need support. You need to listen to each other. You need to be there for one another. You need to work together. You need to have compassion for one another. I remember when I worked, I had a predisposition in my head about working with Alzheimer's patients, dementia. And after I had retired, I came to Sedona, Arizona, and I realized I wasn't quite ready to retire yet. There was a place called the Sedona
Brady Valley Caregivers?
yeah, it was a daycare center, Sedona Sunrise Center. It was a daycare center for Alzheimer's and dementia patients. And they asked me to come and work. At first I was the only nurse, and then a couple of other nurses came on board. And I have to tell you, talk about predisposition. That was one of the best experiences of my life. I learned so much about being in the moment from these patrons and that came to be served. I felt like I was being served. It was a fun gig, but most of all, I learned so much compassion about the disease process and just being in the moment. So never close your mind to what you think you might not like. Be open, and again, just be supportive to one another. And I also worked as a hospice nurse for a while, and that too is a journey of compassion. And working with not only with the patient, but with families also. And that's really kind of the crux of my nursing experience. I still do holistic nursing, and I do a private practice of Jin Shin Jitsu. So the sky's the limit. Be open, be supportive, be caring, be compassionate. That's what I have to offer.
My name is Elaine Renica, and I grew up in Georgia in a small town, and I thought I'd never leave. I thought it would have been great just to see the Mississippi River, but that's not what happened. I went to a local college. It was a 3-year college. The nurses went for 3 years. Everybody else went for 2. But we had to work 40 hours a week at the local hospital, and we were paid 35 cents an hour as a freshman. So we worked 40 hours a week for education. And then we would come, if you worked morning shift, you had class in the afternoon. If you worked the afternoon shift, you had classes in the morning. And as a child, I had always read the Modern Home Medical Advisor, and I was fascinated with the malaria and all the tropical diseases and other things and what it did to the body. So I started very early. My parents were educators. They were principals and county school superintendents and teachers. And since I had done so much, my career has taken me a lot more places than I thought it would. We worked, excuse me a minute, let me get this note. I followed my nursing education later on at other times with a BS and a master's degree, and all day Saturday and Sunday I went to law school. So I had 3 careers going. I had a career in the Navy, I completed that as a 06, which is a captain or a colonel. And I spent 22 years there, mainly with the Marines, desert, Arctic, and overseas and in naval hospitals. I had a second career as a civilian nurse at West Point Military Academy for 7 years. And from there, I went to NASA in Mississippi. This is a girl who was never going to leave small town in Georgia. She was afraid. So I spent time with NASA as their nurse for the space agency there. I left West Point and the military academy and went to public health in Atlanta again. And then I worked for a lumber mill in Oregon. So we had windows, doors, and millwork that they made. And so I did all the, then I went from there to adult dementia and lastly hospice. So I spent, 3 to 7 years in most of those places. I had overseas duty in Rota, Spain, and up in the Arctic Circle, sleeping in the snow with the Marines. Since later on, I had other careers where I worked for public health and adult dementia and lastly hospice. So I lived in Washington State, New York, Texas, and California. So I took the legal nurse course in New York. And I guess there were a lot of doors that just opened for me, not intentionally, and it may happen to you too. And so I hope you take advantage of those. I mean, a door opened, I went in. Sure, I can do that. I didn't know anything about it. I'd never been on a military base in my life. So I hope your careers in nursing would be just as satisfying and rewarding as mine was. And you can do anything, you can live anywhere. In closing, I want to mention one patient that I remember, that I've always remembered. It was very early in my career. I think I was still a student nurse. And I walked into a room and said, "Good morning." I was in charge that morning because we were allowed to do that as a senior. And she said, I said, "How are we doing today?" And she said, "Well, my doctor says I'm doing fine, but I know I'm dying." So think about how you would answer that and how you would respond to that. I was not surprised to know that she was dying, but I was surprised to hear her tell me that. And I thought, how am I going to respond to this? But you'll know. You'll do things you didn't think you could do. So I wish you all well.
Very good.
Hello, I'm Jan Stilke. I come from Maine originally, but I'm in Sedona because I love it here. It's my favorite place to be. Nursing was kind of always there. I was the oldest of 4, and so you kind of take responsibility, I guess. Different age groups. My one sister 14 months younger, a brother 7 years younger, and another sister 12 years younger. So I was kind of like, and my mother taught responsibility right from the very beginning. And so if anybody ever got hurt in the neighborhood, from when I was like 8 or 9 years old, they always came to my house because they wanted to know what they should do. And I have absolutely no idea how that reputation occurred, but that's how it all started. I used to babysit a lot, and one little boy, I was feeding him his bottle, and his eye didn't look right. So I said to his mother, "Have you noticed he has kind of a strange eye on the left? You can kind of like see in it. It's like a little star." And she said, "No, I never noticed that." She took him to the doctor. He had cancer. They removed his eye, and I babysat him until he was about 13 or 14 years old, and he did quite well. But, it was things like that, I guess, that made people kind of want to know what I thought about things. So I kind of was always in the direction of going to nursing. And, of course, in When I was in school, nursing was a 3-year program. But in 1964, the federal government passed the Nurse Training Act of 1964. And when I went to Mercy Hospital, which is a Catholic hospital in Portland, the sister who was the director of nursing there said to my mother, who had spent 12 years in Catholic school, so whatever the nun says goes. And the nun said, your daughter needs to go to college. So, because of the money that was available to go to the different colleges. So mother assumed that I had to go to a Catholic college. I had gone to 12 years of public school, and a Catholic college was like another world to me. Didn't work out really well. And so in my sophomore year, we left. 16 of us out of the 40 that were in the class were asked to leave the program because they did not have enough clinical positions available in the hospital. They had accepted us all because it's good money for the school, but they had not made provision for us in our junior and senior year. We did work in the hospital. Unlike many of the programs, we did work in the hospital from our freshman and sophomore year as well. But by junior year, you needed to spend more time in clinical, and it wasn't available to us in that program. So I transferred to the University of Maine School of Nursing, and that's where I graduated in 1970. Always wanted to be a pediatric nurse. I think right from the very beginning, when I was working with the kids in the neighborhood, I think is really where it started. So my dream had always been to work at Children's Hospital in Boston, and that's what I did. And worked in orthopedics. Somebody said something about orthopedics. Worked in orthopedics, and was dating a guy. We thought we were going to get married. We didn't get married, so I used that money to get my master's degree from Boston University. And graduated in 1974 and married my husband, Steve. And then we started moving around with his job. But as a nurse, you need to know this, as a nurse, you always can get a job. There is no problem. And still, even today, I think there is no problem. So a nursing profession background is absolutely, fabulous. I learned as I was in my master's program that not too many people in 1974 had a master's degree in nursing. And so it was kind of an unusual thing. And a little caveat to that is my son is a nurse as well. He graduated from Northeastern. And he came home from his introduction to nursing class one weekend and said to me, Mom, did you know only 2% of the nurses in the United States have a master's degree? And I said, gee, I didn't know what the number was, but I didn't think there were too many of us. And he said, and you are one of them. I said, amazing. So it's kind of, complicated when you think about generation after generation in terms of thinking about where nursing is going, as you all were talking about just recently. So I worked at Children's, then I worked at 2 technical nursing schools. I taught nursing, maternal child health nursing is what it was called in those days. I worked in public health. I worked as an instructor in a college. I adjunct professor, associate professor, whatever they call them in those days. So I had all those kinds of different positions. And when we finally came back to Maine, my husband and I, he was reading the newspaper and it said that they needed a coordinator for their spina bifida program. And he looked at me and said, how many people in the state of Maine do you think even know what spina bifida is? And I had worked as my master's thesis was writing about a spina bifida kid's first admission for surgery at Children. And it was picked up by Dr. Arthur Pappas, who was the chief of orthopedics at Children's at the time. And he let me develop a program at the Mass Hospital School for children, special needs children, and he let me put together a program for teaching parents how to care for their children who had spina bifida based on my thesis. So it was really kind of exciting and all of that. And so I was really, it was a wonderful program. We brought parents in, they lived in the dormitory that had been the nurses' dormitory, and we taught them how to care for their children who were born with spina bifida. So it was really good. And so that's when my husband said, how many people do you think knew? And I said, so I was the only one who applied, so I got the job. And so, so for 21 years, I ran a special program for families born with children with spina bifida. And it was a absolutely fabulous years of my life, because I got to see these kids grow up. I work with their families. Their families and I are still close. I still get, cards and letters and messages. I've gone to school graduations. I've gone to weddings. I've gone to, after they had their own children, I went in the hospital and worked with them in the hospital after they had their own kids. So it was a really fabulous program. I developed it into a program other than because, again, special needs children do not need just a clinic. They need an environment of positivity. And so I went to the schools, I worked with their primary care physicians, I worked OTPT, speech and language. I became an advocate for them in their schooling and in their later life, helped them to get into, schools that they wanted to go to themselves, and had a real appreciation for the amount of time and effort it takes for a family to live with a child who had special needs. So lots of lessons, lots of do what you know you need to do to make it right. And sometimes it goes against, as everybody else has been saying here, what the prevailing view is. Sometimes you just got to do what you know is right. And that's kind of like how I always, made my practice is what do we need? And also bring others in with you. Like if I know a mom is having trouble with something, I will call another mom on the phone, and I've done this many times. What did you do? I can't remember what you used to do when your kid was having this trouble. What did you do and how did it work? That kind of thing, that commonality, ground. And there's a National Association of Spina Bifida Families, and I became the nurse leader for the nurses for that. I also found out that with a master's degree, you really can't do all the things you need to do, so I went back to school after my children were out of school. I went back to school and got my pediatric nurse practitioner from Simmons, so it was, and that was in 2005, so I was kind of old at the time. But, but it was needed, because then I was going to be able to write what I needed to write and get done what I needed to get done without chasing doctors around to get it done. So it was really good. So lessons learned, do what you know is the right thing to do, and make it work.
Take care of yourself.
And just advice for any new nurses, my son being kind of a new nurse himself, he's married to a nurse who graduated from school in Ireland, so that was a whole different experience for them too, it is changing. And it is difficult to manage the change. It is moving so fast. The technology, the kind of help you can provide human beings that you could never provide human beings in the past. And you really have to be on top of your game, and I don't think you ever stop learning. I think it's constant. You always have to keep learning. So that's my advice.
Good job.